بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم آمين. وبعد. Alhamdulillah, we are in our 51st lesson of Tafsir Surat Al-Baqarah, and it's a blessing, alhamdulillah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We continue with ayah 233 of Surat Al-Baqarah. We're still in this set of ayat that speak on the rulings of divorce. And so we'll start with ayah 233. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والوالدات يرضعن أولادهن حولين كاملين لمن أراد أن يتم الرضاعة وعلى المولود له رزقهن وكسوتهن بالمعروف لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها لا تضار والدة بولدها. Over here it's important the shadda on the ra when recited. لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده وعلى الوارث مثل ذلك فإن أرادا فصالا عن تراض منهما وتشاور فلا جناح عليهما وإن أردتم أن تسترضعوا أولادكم فلا جناح عليكم إذا سلمتم ما آتيتم بالمعروف واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله بما تعملون بصير. So the verse starts out speaking about mothers. وَالْوَالِدَاتِ. In Arabic, walada is to have a child. Walada is to have, or to be born, you say walada. And so the person who has a child is called walid. It's called walid. And generally in Arabic, when you want to make something feminine, you add a ta marbuta. Walidah. Anything. Muslim, muslimah. Mu'min, mu'minah. Right? And so walidah is a singular. Walidat is plural. So mothers. Here they say women bearing children. I think that's a lot of words just to say mothers. And mothers, that's really what it is. وَالْوَالِدَاتِ. And mothers, يُرْضِعْنَ. Suckle, يُرْضِعْنَ is to do رضاعة, is to breastfeed. أَوْلَادَهُنَّ. Their children. حَوْلَيْنَ. حَوْلَيْنَ means 2 years. Hawl is 1 year. In Arabic, other words to say year are sana or am. Am is a year. Sana is a bad year. You don't usually use sana unless it's like something, it was a difficult year. Not a bad year, but a difficult year. Am is more general. And hawl is another word in Arabic that's used to say a year. Year in Arabic. So hawlain, 2 years. Whenever you want to make something refer to two, quantity of two, you say hawlain, muslimain, and so on and so forth. So hawlain, 2 years. Kamilain, complete, right? 2 complete years. And so here the command is that women are given this command that they should suckle their children for 2 years. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, لِمَنْ أَرَادَ أَن يُتِمَّ الرَّضَاعَةِ. And this is for whoever wants to complete the breastfeeding or fulfill the period of suckling. All right? So it's not obligatory. It's not obligatory. It is only obligatory if the only source of nourishment the child has is suckling. If there's no other option, the kid refuses to suckle drink formula. In the past there was no formula. So let's talk about the ayat in the context of the society and the time that it was revealed in. There was no formula. So mothers had one of two options. Parents had one of two options. Either the mother suckles the child, or she hires a woman or a group of women to suckle her children. And so these were the two options. And so here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لِمَنْ أَرَادَ أَن يُتِمَّ الرَّضَاعَ, for whoever wants to complete the entire period. We said it's not obligatory unless if there's no other option. Then at that point it's obligatory on the mother to suckle the child. If she does have an option, then it's recommended. It's recommended for a mother to suckle her child for 2 complete years. What's interesting is recently, I think 2 years ago or so, medical research has been continuous on how long how long do doctors recommend a child should be suckled or breastfed, and the most recent recommendation is 2 years. The American Pediatric Organization or Association and the World Health Organization as well. Now their official recommendation is that mothers suckle their children for 2 years. And this, subhanAllah, caused some, there was the whole discussion on the internet. I remember when the article came out. But subhanAllah, the beauty of the Quran, right? Now, this doesn't mean that the child doesn't eat anything else. It just means that the suckling does not stop, right? They're able to start eating soft foods and, at 6 months or so. And, gradually they start eating heavier foods. By 1 year, they're able to eat, good, and by the time they have full teeth, they can eat, almost everything really, as long as it's, digestible for them. And so, subhanAllah, the Quran captures this, right? Like a parent should suckle their child 2 years. And this reminds us that, the believer should have complete reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that know that this sharia has been revealed from Allah, Rabbul Alameen. Al-Alim al-Khabir, the one who knows and is aware of all matters. So whatever He has legislated, it's to our benefit. And whatever He has prohibited is to our benefit. And so that's just a conviction we need to always have in our hearts and have that conviction. And we don't need science to prove the Quran. We don't need one scientific miracle, right? It's enough that we know this is the truth. But these findings, alhamdulillah, they're encouraging. Right? You see it increases it's reinforcing. It reinforces our iman. It strengthens our iman, right? But it isn't a requirement for our iman. It isn't a requirement. And then the ayah continues. Before I say that, actually maybe I'll add it after this next segment. وَعَلَى الْمَوْلُودِ لَهُ رِزْقُهُنَّ وَكِسْوَتُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Here it translates, and the father, mawludi lahu. The word uses, and for the father of the child. Rizquhunna wa kiswatuhunna. Is that he shall feed and clothe the mothers. The men shall feed and clothe the mothers, bil ma'ruf, according to usage. Here, bil ma'ruf means according to what is customarily normal. All right, remember this word ma'ruf? We came up multiple times. Ma'ruf can mean good, just general goodness. Ma'ruf can also mean what is customarily normal. In Arabic, they call culture, they call it urf. It's called urf. And so, a woman who suckles a child should be provided for according to what is customarily normal. And so, what is this referring to? Is this referring to the mother, or is this referring to women who are hired to suckle the child? This is referring to both, wallahu a'lam. That any woman who suckles a child has the right to request compensation for breastfeeding that child. Who's responsible for that? The father. وَعَلَى الْمَوْلُودِ لَهُ رِزْقُهُنْ. And upon the father, right, the father of the child, is provisions and clothing for the woman who breastfeeds the child. Bil ma'ruf, according to that which is customarily normal, so something reasonable. A woman can't exaggerate and take advantage of the husband. The ayat are first and primarily addressing divorced women. Because remember, the ayat, all of these verses are talking about divorced women.
That's what you said here.
Divorced women, right? Yeah, divorced mothers. So it's addressing their right first, that divorced mothers have a right to request compensation to breastfeed and suckle the child, according to that which is normal, customarily normal and reasonable. That is the right of divorced mothers. Now the scholars debate, how about a non-divorced mother? Meaning a married woman, she's still with the husband, can she request? Now, customarily, it's not often that you hear a mother request compensation for suckling her child, right? And so it's not that common. But does she have the right, if she wanted to, does she have the right to be like, hey, I want to be compensated. This is exhausting. I'm spending time with the child. I want a special allowance, if you were to use that term, for, suckling this child. And yes, she has the right, right? And this brings our attention to another thing, right? That generally women are caretakers of the home and caretakers of the children. The men are the providers. Men shouldn't limit what they provide to their women to just the essentials. It shouldn't be like, hey, I paid the rent, I paid the utilities, paid the necessities, I provided the groceries, like, khalas, that's it. A man should give his wife, especially if she's given up her work, she's not working, and she's made her focus the children in her home, then the husband should honor her with extra, some type of allowance. If bi'idhnillah, if it's within his capacity, allow her to have money of her own. And even if she doesn't spend it, allow that to be something that she saves for herself, buys whatever she likes, jewelry, gifts, gives it to her family members, whatever she likes, to honor her in such a way, to give her some financial autonomy and not to make her completely dependent on the man. And subhanAllah, how often you hear stories that are very disappointing. I remember I had a case, and the woman was like, my husband will give me X amount of money for groceries, X amount of money for this, that, and that's all I get. If I have any other need, I have to justify it. Why? Right? Like he's holding her accountable for every penny. And he has a savings and he has accounts, but he gives me no access. I don't know what he's saving. When I ask him, he says, I'm saving for the future, investments for the family, this and that. And that's really, un-Islamic. That a person limits his family so much that he only provides the essentials, and then anything beyond that is like, no, you don't need that. Just be content with what, the essentials, and that's it. And that's not really appropriate. Islamically, it's not. Rather, the women are given a right, those who are suckling, first and foremost. They're given a right to ask for compensation for suckling the children. This we said is primarily divorced women, but in the Shafi'i and Hanbali school, they said this also includes married women. They can also request an allowance for suckling the child. In the Hanafi school, they say no. They say, and I believe also in the Maliki school, they say no. They say a mother who is married, then she is not entitled to request some type of allowance or payment for suckling the child. Now, regardless of the debate, this is a matter, of course, that's dealt with by the Qudah, the Islamic courts and Sharia councils. Regardless of that, should a man give? He should. He should give his wife, if he has the ability, he should give his wife and his family generously. He should allow her to have her own savings. He should allow her to have financial autonomy to buy things of her interest, even if there's no necessity for them. Just for her to be able to buy those things that bring her pleasure and comfort, on top of giving her gifts and so on and so forth. Allow her to send money to her family and be kind to her relative. Allow her to give sadaqah on her own without him being, always involved, right? So this is Islamically encouraged. Another mas'ala that's important to discuss: can the parent with custody request compensation? And this is the mother, oftentimes or usually, or let's say if somebody else has custody of the children, can they request compensation for their service? We're not talking about what the children need. That's required. Child support for the child is required Islamically, right? That's not something debated. That's why when I hear people saying like, oh, you have to pay child, I'm like, that's Islamic. It's sad that we don't have that in the Muslim world and people can get away without having to spend money on their children, once they're divorced. That's actually wrong. But now the question comes up, can a woman say, hey, I'm raising the children, I want custody of them, and she has the right, the mothers have priority to custody, but on top of that she says, I want child support and I want an allowance for me, for the care that I provide the children. Can she ask such a thing? Again, debated in the Shafi'i and I believe in the Hanbali school, they say yes, that she can. In the Hanafi school, I believe they make a distinction. They say if she needs the financial assistance, then he has to provide housing for her. Full housing, not just the kids' portion, but full housing for her if the need is there and that she's not financially capable. And so there's that discussion among the scholars. But yes, she does deserve that. She can ask for that. And it's allowed under the Shafi'i and Hanbali school. They do allow it that the custodian or the one who has custody of the children to request some type of compensation for the care that they provide the children. Wallahu alam. This could be somebody who's raising orphans, and subhanAllah, the orphan maybe is wealthy and has significant wealth. They can request a portion be taken of that wealth for them to receive as allowance for the service they provide this child. Now, they themselves shouldn't be the ones to determine what is appropriate. It should be a third party. It should be the courts, or it should be a Sharia council. It should be by the guidance of qualified scholars and professionals in that field to determine what is a proper allowance for somebody that's taking care of these children. Wallahu a'lam. You had a question, Brother Karama?
Yes, there's a question. So you see, you say many cases that the women more suffering when they divorce, right?
Yes.
So before they get married, can they make a contract? Say, hey, okay, I want a contract, like your salary, right? I want 1/3. In case it happen in the future, then I have money, to save myself because I sacrifice everything, like no go to school, no work. Can the woman do that or not?
So the brother is asking, can a woman stipulate in the contract some type of allowance or a percentage of the pay or something to kind of ensure financial security? Something that I've seen done in many Muslim societies is with the mahar, they'll do that. So what they'll do is they'll request a early or like mahar paid up front and mahar paid at the end or later or delayed mahar. I forgot, like they call it muqaddam and muakhar, right? They say like muqaddam is the immediate mahar and muakhar is the mahar that's delayed. So the immediate mahar is something affordable, whatever, something reasonable that this man can inshallah afford. The delayed mahar is usually some large amount. Like I remember I did one nikah and I was a bit surprised. At least in my Somali culture, it's not common that they do this, but this was an Iraqi family. And in Iraq and in some parts of, a lot of parts of Arabia, it's common. They have the muqaddam and muakhar. I'm not sure with other parts of Africa or in Pakistan, I don't know what the norms are. But in the way they have it is, the delayed mahar is a large amount. It was $50,000. The immediate mahar was a small amount. And the delayed mahar is only paid in the case there's a divorce. She doesn't request it. But if there's a divorce, they enforce the delayed mahar. They're like, hey, you agreed to this, you have to pay her this large mahar. So the mahar, the purpose of that delayed mahar is not to burden the husband at the time of marriage. It's to grant the woman financial security if a divorce ever happens. So that's one. In Egypt, I believe, what they do is they require an apartment. You must purchase an apartment when you marry a woman. And the apartment is gifted to the woman. It's her property, it's under her name. And the reason they do this is, if she's ever divorced, she has housing security if a divorce ever happens. Right? And so the way they ensure that is by making sure, like at the time of marriage, purchase an apartment, put it under her name, and then you can get married. So it's like common. If you go to Egypt, they're like, it's standard. You have to have a shaqqa. You have to have, shukka, like you have to have an apartment. If you don't have an apartment, then you're not ready, even if you have everything else. But if you can't provide an apartment to your wife, even if it's like in the outskirts of the city, somewhere, some small town, whatever it is, whatever you can afford, whatever is within your means. But you have to give her a home that is hers, so that if something was to ever happen, she has her own home and she's not put in a situation where she's houseless. Now she has to go back to her family, and that's a heavy burden on her, the kids, and her family as well. And so that's a common in that society. So there are practices. Muslim societies have seen these issues, come up in societies, and scholars have addressed it through different ways. One might be mahar muqaddam muakhar, delayed mahar, or the other one might be requiring some type of housing be provided under her name to make sure that she has security with regards to housing. So something like that is fine. To say like entitlement to a percentage of somebody's salary, that's a bit difficult. And that's also, it can be a large amount of money, and it can be endless, right? And so to say a percentage of somebody's salary is what I require, then I'm not going to say it's impermissible, although that's what I kind of my initial inclination is that it is, but it's practically very difficult and not a healthy agreement. It can lead to all types of conflict and problem between spouses. So definitely don't recommend that option. But some of these practices I think are reasonable. And any type of way to make financial security, if there's a divorce, that's something just to consult with a professional and find ways to secure her. But yes, this is very important. Especially if that woman is going to be a stay-home wife, right? She's staying home, taking care of the children, she's not working. She has no savings of her own, right? So she's married 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and now, subhanAllah, they've separated. What has she saved? What type of financial security does she have? Nothing. Alhamdulillah, in the US, you can go to the courts, but then what happens there's also a lot of abuse. And that's why prenups are important. And so prenups are for the protection of both couples. It's Islamically in the interest of man and woman to have prenups. Islamically, we encourage it. And so prenups are also very important. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Yeah, inshallah. All right, let's continue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says after, لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها. لا تكلف نفس. Tukallaf is like burdened. Nafsun. A soul is not burdened except, what's the translation here? According to his capacity or according to her capacity. Soul is feminine in Arabic, so it's wus'aha instead of wus'ihi. Right, so لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها. For those who are paying attention to the Arabic pronouns, because if it was masculine, you would say wus'uhu. You make it masculine. But nafs, the word nafs in Arabic is feminine, so it's wus'aha. So a person is not burdened more than its capacity. What does this mean? That a man is not burdened more than what he can afford. So you have to take into consideration the earning of the husband. What is his capability? What is his capacity? What can he afford? And that the payment for the suckling should be according to what is reasonably affordable to him. And then the next ayah or the next part says, لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده. Here he says, nor should he whom the child belongs, neither the mother, لا تضار والدة. So tudar is like harm. So the mother should not be harmed. Walidatun is the mother. بِوَلَدِهَا so the mother shall not be put to loss for her child. Nor should the father. وَلَا مَوْلُودٌ لَهُ بِوَلَدٍ. Nor should the father be put to loss for his child. Here in the commentary, he says in 390, the father of the child shall have to feed and clothe the mother of the child in all circumstances, so far as she is his wife, and if she is divorced, and if divorced, so far as she is under iddah. He goes into a lot of details, I don't want to get into all that. And the parents of the child should not harass one another because of the child. E.g., meaning, the mother should not refuse to suckle the child without reason, or the father should not separate the child from the mother to get the child suckled by another woman. So here, he's explaining, because the verse says, لا تضار والدة بولدها. A mother should not be harmed for her child. Right? What does that mean? How do you harm a mother for her child in this context? It's that he takes the child, he says, you know what, I'm not going to give you anything. I'd rather pay a strange woman to suckle the child than pay you. So he's harming the child. He shouldn't do that. He can't do that. That's impermissible. She has priority to suckling her child. Is that clear? And then what does it mean that also the father should not be harmed for his child? He also should not be harmed in the case that the mother refused to suckle the child. And she forces him to hire other people. Or not that, I'm sorry. She raises her price extremely high. There's a market rate, and she's like, no, I want triple that market rate. Right? And so remember, this is according to old tradition. Today, with formulas, things are a bit different. And we can talk about the fiqh of that a little bit, inshallah, once we finish the ayat. And so the mother or the father should not harm their child. Something that we can take from this. So the hukum here is very specific, right? With suckling. Like the father, the mother should not ask for something ridiculous to burden the father, and the father should not refuse her compensation to suckle the child and offer it to somebody else. That's the hukum we're talking about in this context. Something that we take beyond this, in the case of separation and divorce, the parents must make sure that they are not harming one another through the children. Do not use the children as pawns to hurt the other person. And subhanallah, how often does that happen? Right? Something small I've seen, like a smaller thing, and there's many examples, but in a small example, a couple were getting divorced. They've already reached the point where they felt like there was no recovery. And the mother in this case was kind of, tarnishing the father's reputation with the children. Oh, we're not together because of your father. Your father did this, your father did that. It's his fault. And she kept, kind of tarnishing the dad's reputation and hurting the dad by kind of speaking negatively of him to the children. And this is very hurtful. But he's a grown man, right? Like, you're not going to hurt a man, but you can say that, but who are you really hurting? It's the children. They're suffering. Because in their eyes, the child, their parents are the protectors. They're the ones that they can solve any problem. In the child's mind, when they see their parent, they see them, this is the person that protects me from all harm. They know the solution to every problem. Any fear I have, they can protect me. Now imagine that protection that you have, this trust and this comfort and that you have, that you feel this is everything. Now that person is being completely tarnished and now this negative image is being put in your head. What does that do to the child? It takes away any sense of protection, of comfort, of love they have in their lives. And that's there. We've seen it with custody. Subhanallah, I remember another case I was dealing with. A brother, mashallah, he had a really well job, makes really great income, earnings. And the mother was like, no, you're not. I'm not going to give you the children, any custody over the children, not even the weekends. Unless you give me your 401k and your stocks, and you offer X amount of money in child support, which was ridiculous, which was like nearly, I think, $5,000 a month, on top of all of that. And she said, that's the only way I'll give you custody of your children. Otherwise, you're going to see me in court. No way. And this is not rare. This is the sad thing. It's not rare. It happens time and time again. And other times it's on the men's side. And the men's side is subhanAllah, also very common. And so I used two examples of sisters, subhanAllah, just because those were two examples that came to mind. But on the other side with men, subhanAllah, if from my experience, I found, I don't want to say the majority of divorced men that divorce, but a significant amount of them, with divorce, they completely remove all financial obligations to their children. And I have just one case I can remember right now. The mother could not get this man to pay for the children's education and their basic essentials, and she had to work to provide for them, and And the father would hide his earnings. He would get contracting jobs so that you can't track it through child support, and he would move from company to company, hide his earnings. And I've seen this. And the term I usually use is what? A lot of men, they divorce their children with their wife, metaphorically. They divorce the child, they divorce the wife. Is that okay? Khalas, these children are not my responsibility anymore. They're the responsibility of their mother. So they have no financial obligations. And so all of this is what? They think they're harming the adult, but really who's being harmed? The child. But they're using the child as a pawn to hurt this other person. It's like, I'm not going to pay child support, so this person that I divorced gets no financial pay for me. I'm not going to contribute a cent to them because of what they've done to me. So they're not going to know child support. Right? I'm not going to give the father any custody because he divorced me. You're hurting the kids. The kids are suffering. So here the ayah, if we were to generalize it, do not use the children as pawns to hurt one another. Right? No matter what the case is, leave the children out of it. And that's also another benefit of prenups. It's a protection for the children. You ensure the security of the children. You ensure that the children cannot be used as pawns in the case of divorce between couples. Continuing. وَعَلَى الْوَارِثِ مِثْلُ ذَلِكَ. And so the ayah continues. And the same is obligatory on the heirs. And so the heir, who is the heir? They say the heirs of the child, or the heirs of the father. It can be either or. Meaning that if the father dies, the kid's inheritance can be used to pay for the cost of his suckling. Also, another hukum is that if the father dies and he has no wealth that he left for the child, then the paternal relatives of the child are responsible for the cost of the child being suckled and taken care of. Is that clear? If there's no one from the paternal family and from the parents, if there's no wealth from the father's inheritance and nor from the paternal family, then the Baytul Mal has to pay. Meaning it has to be paid by the state. The state has to pay for the cost of this child's sustenance, I guess. Continuing. فإن أرادا فصالا عن تراض منهما وتشاور فلا جناح عليهما. And if they want فإن أرادا, meaning the father and mother, فصالا, to wean. Fisal is to wean the child. فصالا عن تراض, according to a mutual agreement. وتشاور, and consultation. So تراض is like agreement from them both, منهما. وَتَشَاوُرْ, and consultation. So they make an agreement, they consult with one another, and they're like, okay, we're going to wean the kid from suckling. فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا, then there's no burden upon them both. So this is giving the parents the permission to agree that they can stop suckling for the child if they both agree. Now the question here, the scholars debate. They say, can a woman wean a child without the approval of the father? Or does it have to be a mutual agreement? Because here it says it has to be a mutual agreement between both. When do you wean a child? When both parents have agreed, okay, now is fine. But let's say the mother decides that she wants to wean the child without the approval of the father. And the father's like, no, but the mother's like, I can't, for whatever her reason is. If there's a medical reason, that's one thing. But let's say a personal reason, she's like, I cannot keep, feeding this child breast milk. I'm going to feed him formula or not even formula. I'm going to wean the child off milk. What is the ruling? And wallahu alam, the correct ruling is that he cannot. He has no authority to enforce it. He cannot force her to breastfeed the child if she makes the decision not to. But he can take it up to the courts in Islamic, society, Islamic courts, and they rule regarding that matter. But generally, no, he cannot. Yes.
Can he pay for somebody else?
Can he pay somebody else to do it? Yes. If she refuses, then yes. So she has priority, but if she refuses, then he can pay somebody else to suckle the child. Wallahu alam. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You can pray in the room, brothers. وإن أردتم أن تسترضعوا أولادكم فلا جناح عليكم إذا سلمتم ما آتيتم بالمعروف. And this is the question that you asked. And if you want to, وإن أردتم, the fathers and the mothers and fathers both together, أن تسترضعوا, that you and if you wish, if you and if you people wish your children to be suckled. وَإِنْ أَرَدْتُمْ أَن تَسْتَرْضِعُوا, right? If you want to hire someone to suckle your children, أَوْلَادَكُمْ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ, there's no burden upon you. إِذَا سَلَّمْتُمْ مَا آتَيْتُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, if you pay what you agreed to accordingly, right? So if you're willing to pay, then you can hire somebody. There's no burden. There's no problem with that. The only thing here is something that is modern, with regards to, what do they call? I don't know if somebody knows, like, the service where you can like purchase breast milk through hospitals and, or just like third parties. I don't know what the title. There's a service, right? Like there are women who, subhanAllah, breast milk is something connected to a person's biology, right? Genetics. And so some women genetically are able to produce large amounts of breast milk. And some women are just not. It's a lot harder. They're not can't produce as large amounts. Their milk dries up a lot quicker.
A midwife?
A midwife? Is that the proper term?
Yeah, nurse, midwife.
Yeah.
What nurse?
A what nurse? Yeah. What nurse, right? So what I wanted to say is, we have something in our society that's modern now, right? A lot of women, they're like, okay, I don't want to breastfeed children. I don't want to breastfeed my child. For whatever reason, they're busy, they're working. They don't want to get up, 3-4 times a night to breastfeed the child. They're like, I'd rather just have formula. But I also don't want to use formula. So what do? They buy breast milk from other women, right? Wet nurses, and they use their milk to feed their child. They want to make sure the child gets the best nutrition. They just can't do it themselves. But and the Quran allows them to hire a woman. But here they're not hiring one individual, rather they're purchasing breast milk from some third party. And it can be random women. You don't know who's providing it. It's just breast milk. So they deliver tens of women, hundreds of women delivering their breast milk, they get paid for it. Right? It's a business. And then they sell it to these parents who want breast milk for their children to provide them the best nutrition for their child. And so, is this permissible in Islam? It's not. Although it's permissible to hire a wet nurse to breastfeed the child, you cannot buy milk without knowing who this milk was taken from. Is that clear? So that is a requirement. Because, what's the reasoning? Why do we have to know who the woman is? Because in Islam, mahram relations can be formed through suckling. 5 full sucklings make that child a mahram to the mother, and a mahram to her children, and a mahram to her father. Okay? And so, because of that, a person might be a mahram to a woman, multiple women, and not know that they're mahram to them. Because they consume milk from these women without knowing who they are. And so a society that does that normatizes this practice, what happens? Then you have a society where a lot of people are mahram to each other, but don't know. Right? An entire generation is being raised where now kids are becoming mahram to other women and their children and their family, and they don't know. And so that creates a kind of a messy situation with that community. And so for that reason, it's impermissible to buy, breast milk from such places. It is allowed to buy it from individuals whom you know. This is the name of so-and-so, this is who I got the breast milk from, and this is the breast milk I use for my children. Now you don't want to, you want to limit it. Maybe 1 or 2 women, max. So because now this child is mahram to them. But now if you do it 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 women, now you have 10 different mahrams. What does this mean? This child can never marry from these families ever. So you have to be careful. And this has happened in the past where women have breastfed children, and years later, the children don't know, and they get married. And this woman she's not in the town anymore, and she comes to visit one day, And she says, how are these two married? I breastfed both of these kids when they were young. Because we said some women, they mashallah, genetically, they just produce more breast milk than most other women. And so they breastfeed, mashallah, multiple children in their community. They help out. In some cultures, it's very normal. And so this woman was like, no, I breastfed this child, and I also breastfed this child as well. They're both those two children are siblings. They're mahram to one another. They have to be separated. And they have children. So they're separated. They have to be forced. And this is like, I remember in Yemen when we were studying, like, there were cases, Mashaykh were like, yeah, there were cases where people were married and they didn't know they were mahram. Right? And this is like in small towns and villages where people knew each other, still this would happen. Imagine in a whole city where people are just buying other women's milk, across the board. Nobody knows who they're getting it from, who they're giving it to, and it's being, changed, going, just shared like that. It creates a really, really messy situation with regards to family ties, marriages, permissibility of who to marry, who not to marry, who's mahram, who's not mahram. And so for that reason, it is permissible, but it has to be known who that person, that woman is. Wallahu a'lam. Did you have a question? Or did you have a question? No? Karana, you had a question?
Yeah. So like we live in a non-Muslim country, right? So do a Muslim country and mix with non-Muslim? So we hire the women have the milk from the Muslim women, or it doesn't matter?
Can the milk be from a non-Muslim woman? Correct? Yeah. It can be, as long as the person is confident that she's not, normally eating haram food. If a person knows that this woman is eating haram food, then at that point it becomes haram. Like if she drinks wine and eats pork, then at that point it becomes haram. So it can be permissible if what she consumes is permissible. But if she does consume haram food regularly, then wallahu alam, it would be no.
What if she doesn't eat halal?
Halal could be, because it could be like Al-Khattab. If somebody argues like, okay, she eats chicken and beef.
Like goes to buy chicken from Costco or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. It would be doubted, because the issue of like non-Muslim meat in Western societies is a strongly debated issue. So where there you would go, depending on your position. If your position is like, hey, all these non-Muslim meats are haram, then yeah, you can't. If a person says yes, then you can. So it would be best to avoid. I generally would say no, because even our scholars, they say don't use the plates and utensils of non-Muslims. Generally, if you read the books of fiqh, they will say it's haram because it's washed. But they say because they consume haram with it and so on, so they say don't use the utensils and plates of non-Muslims. And so that's utensils and plates. And now imagine, breast milk that you're giving to your newborn, the initial sustenance by which this child is growing and developing, right? You want to be a bit more selective with that, right? And so halal, eating halal is so important in our deen. Eating halal is so important in our deen. It's a command Allah gave to the messengers. All messengers, eat from that which is pure of the earth, right? So eating halal is of the most essential ways. It affects our iman on a spiritual level. That when a person eats haram, it darkens their heart. It makes it easier for them to sin. They lose barakah and nur from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they consume haram. And so their likeliness to transgress and to be misguided increases with their consumption of haram. And so with that, like a Muslim does want to be very cautious with what they eat. That's one of those things where we're always on the same. Like with Islam, everything is permissible unless we know it's haram. With meat, all meats are haram unless we're sure it's halal. Like that's how, especially with meats, is that serious. Like we have to be really make sure that the meats we eat and the food we bring to our homes are foods that we are convinced is halal. If it's doubtful, again, this is according to your level of iman, right? Some people, alhamdulillah, they have the discipline. Some people are like, hey, I'm just trying to, manage these basics of Islam, the essentials. This is really hard. Inshallah, one day I'll do it. And I'm like, okay, khalas. You and your iman and where you're at, So also prioritize. But if a person can, they want to make sure this is one of those areas they're very conservative when it comes to food they eat. Wallahu a'lam. We don't want to get into food. So if it's a food question, let's save it for later.
I was talking about the breastfeed of the Prophet
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, yes.
So how do you coincide with...
What's the question about it? So the Prophet ﷺ was suckled by Halima Sa'diyah, right? So she is his mother through suckling, and her children are his siblings, alayhi salatu wasalam. So if somebody was to ask you a trick question, they're like, who are the siblings of the Prophet ﷺ? Who are you? He has no biological siblings, right? Alayhi salatu wasalam. Nor his father, nor mother, nor his father had children, right? Except him, alayhi salatu wasalam. But he does have siblings as well. So his siblings are siblings through suckling from Halima Sa'diyya radiallahu anha. So they are his mahram. Halima is a mahram to him. It's said that, I believe in Sirah, there are like, I think Barakah, she was a servant woman. I'm not sure if she suckled the Prophet ﷺ, but the Prophet ﷺ loved her. The mother of Usama bin Zayd. So that's, I think there's some discussion, but I don't recall too well. But yeah.
When you finalize that, like a non-believing woman can suckle a Muslim.
Well, this is before Sharia. So this is before, right? The Prophet ﷺ, there was no Sharia yet, so that's fine. Yeah.
Really quick. You
Yeah.
said the limit was, I heard you say 5.
5, yes. 5
Yes,
sucklings.
4.
Nope.
You're okay.
You're okay. Yep. If it's 4 sucklings, you're okay. 3, you're okay. Right? It's 5 full sucklings. Then that makes the child a mahram to the person. Wallahu a'lam.
What about age limit? Like let's say if you...
Age, yes. Under the age of 2.
Okay, yeah,
Good.
Let's say for some reason you went to 3.
Yeah. That doesn't count. Naam. It's under the age of 2. Under the age of 2. Because the mas'ala came, how about if a man consumes the milk of his wife, does that make him? No, it doesn't. Because that has come. Even during the time of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, a man, like if he drinks the milk of his wife on accident or whatever, does that make him mahram? And then there was a case, a fatwa that came out. There's a whole, I don't know if you heard.
Yeah,
So some years back, right, like a grown man wanted to become the mahram to another woman because of some barriers, I forgot what it was. And so I think they got a fatwa from some scholar that allowed them to, because of some difficult circumstances. And that's a scholarly debate. There are circumstances like, let's say an adopted child raised by a family. The girl, let's say it's a girl or even a boy. Let's say it's a boy. The boy is raised in this home. His adopted mother, like that's his mom. That's all he knows his entire life. She's loved him, cared for him, raised him, but now he's a grown man. He's in maturity, he's an adult. She's not his mahram. What does he do? Right? How does he navigate that situation? It's his home, that's his mom, that's all he knows. How do you navigate? Or a girl, does she have to wear hijab? And does she have to wear hijab around her son? Or if she's adopted, does the girl now have to wear hijab around her father who's raised her entire life? How do you navigate that? So there are some debates. There's actually a case during the time of Sahaba where this issue came up. I don't want to get into it because I want to just focus a little bit more on the ayat. With Ramadan a month and a half away, I was hoping we finished the surah, but I don't know if we will at this rate. But that's also a topic of discussion. So if we ever have a case like that happens where we have like orphans that are adopted, or just maybe a child grows up in the home of another family. Sometimes, siblings will raise the child of their sibling for whatever reason. I know like sometimes in Somali culture, oftentimes, if one of the siblings does not have children, right? And subhanAllah, that's their nasib. They never had any children. Their other sibling, let's say, has like 6 children. They'll give one of their children to their sibling who has no children. And they're like, you raise this kid, and this kid kind of has like 2 moms. His aunt that raised him like his mom, and then his biological mom who he knows. So that's very common. Like a common practice that families do. If one child has one family member has a lot of children, then they'll give one to the other family to raise, so that woman has a child to raise and comfort and help. And it's also an assistance for that other woman, because now some of that responsibility is shifted to her sister or her brother, and so on. So in that case, how do you navigate that? So there are situations where it could come up, and those are cases where I would say refer to the guidance of scholars to navigate. Wallahu a'lam. So what did we say? We got to the ayah, right? If you want to hire someone to suckle your children, it's permissible as long as you pay them what is customarily normal. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Fear Allah and know that Allah is ever watchful of what you do. Or Allah is of what you do, ever watchful, basir, right? Again, subhanAllah, we see that the ayat are calling to a mindfulness of Allah with our actions, right? Because true character shows at the times of disagreement and dispute, right? Everybody can be the greatest person when they're happy. Great smiles, great hugs, best person, open the doors for people, whatever. But then it's like, okay, when you're angry, what's your character like, right? MashaAllah, when you're happy, you pray, you're great, everything great, smiles. When they're angry, cursing and yelling and shouting and banging and, inconsiderate, unfair, unreasonable, selfish, right? Character shows at the time of anger. It doesn't really show at the time of ease. And we know Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, you don't know a person until what? You've done one of three, right? You've engaged into a business partnership with, or you've dealt with them with regards to finances. You've shared a home with them, or you've traveled with them. And travel maybe is not as applicable today as in the past, because traveling in the past was extremely difficult and it's for long periods of time. And so you really see the character of a person. Like, are you selfish? Are you considerate? Do you take care? Do you go out of your way to help people? Are you impatient? Are you, right? Like, are you, kind, generous? All of these characters show when you live with someone, when you conduct business with someone. And so here in the context of divorce, subhanAllah, the worst comes out of people in divorce, right? The nastiest sides of people's character comes out. And so here we have to be careful that, Allah Ta'ala warns us to be mindful of our character and our a'mal when there is dispute in one's home. Wallahu a'lam. Do we have time for one more ayah? How do you guys feel? 9 minutes, you said? Before the recording. Okay, I think we can finish in 9 minutes. Less than 9 minutes, inshallah. We okay? A few more minutes? All right, bismillah. We took a long ayah, alhamdulillah. One more ayah and then inshallah we'll conclude. So this next ayah talks about the ruling of iddah for a woman, a widowed woman, a woman whose husband passes away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرًا. And those of you, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ, who die. Yutawaffawna, those of you who die. Minkum, among you, or from you. Minkum is from you, right? The word min in Arabic means from. So minkum, from you. So those who die from you, وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا, and they leave behind azwajan, spouses, right? Their wives. They leave behind their wives. يَتَرَبَّصْنَ, the women shall wait, those women shall wait, يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ, by themselves, أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرًا, 4 months and 10 days. And so this is the iddah in the case of death. If a woman's husband dies, then her iddah is 4 months and 10 days. This is even if there has been no intimacy, if the marriage is not consummated. If a subhanAllah, sometimes it happens, very, very unfortunate, that a woman gets married and on their wedding day, one of the spouses dies and sometimes the man dies. Something happens, subhanAllah. And so her iddah is 4 months and 10 days. And so that's the iddah of a woman whose husband dies. How about if she's pregnant? If she's pregnant, some scholars, they say whichever is longer. The longer term. If the iddah is long, if her pregnancy is longer, then it's her pregnancy, the delivery of the child. But if she's 9 months pregnant, then her husband dies, then they say 4 months and 10 days. Does that make sense? Because her iddah would only be a few days or a few weeks. But wallahu alam, the stronger opinion is that, the majority opinion is that no. The iddah of a woman, of a widowed woman, is the delivery of the child across the board. No change. They don't make an exception. So that's the iddah of a pregnant woman whose husband passes away. SubhanAllah, our Messenger ﷺ, that's what happened, right? The father Prophet ﷺ, he passed while traveling, and Sayyidina Amina, she was pregnant with the Prophet ﷺ. And so it's a case that has happened in our own history of our Prophet ﷺ, and we do see from time to time. فإذا بلغن أجلهن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن بالمعروف. And so when they fulfill their term, right, they بلغن أجلهن, they fulfill their term, فلا جناح عليكم, then there is no sin, there is no burden. فيما فعلن في أنفسهن بالمعروف, in what they do for themselves according to what is ma'ruf, what is customarily normal. And so when a woman is on her iddah, or from a widowed woman is on an iddah, some of the ahkam that apply is one, according to the majority, she cannot leave her home except for necessities. So she should stay in her home. And according to the Hanafi school, she can do her iddah in any home she chooses. So she can go to her parents' home, but in the Shafi'i school, and I believe the majority, they say no, her iddah must be in the home of her husband, the home that she shared with her husband. And so she must stay in that home and does not leave except for necessities. So if there isn't work, something of that nature, medical reasons, necessities, yes, but social gatherings, personal outings, things of that sort are not permitted. Second, she cannot use any fragrances. Any fragrances, any type of adornment, makeup, anything of that sort is also all prohibited, even if it's in the confinement of her home. And none of that is allowed. How do the Shafi'iyya support women who are on their waiting period, widowed women who are on their waiting period, their iddah? They have a family member stay with her. Because you don't want to leave with somebody, subhanAllah, grieving in a home by themselves. So oftentimes what they will do is they'll have a family member stay with her, at least for the beginning portion of the iddah. In other societies who specifically adopt the Hanafi school, and I believe in Egypt they adopt the Hanafi school, the woman goes to the home of her family and has her iddah there. So same rules apply, but she takes her residence at her family's home. And so that's how some of the madhahib, cultures have adopted to the rulings of the madhahib. Wallahu alam. So once their iddah is over, then they're free. Khalas. None of all these restrictions are removed, and they're free to go about their matters as they please. Here he says, with regards to 395, this segment of the ayah, he says, when the widows fulfill their iddah, there is no sin upon them if they remarry according to the rule of Sharia. For these widows, the use of scent and decoration are lawful. Right. So yeah, once they're out with their iddah, they can remarry, they can use scents and decoration, adornment, and there's no problem. Wallahu bima ta'maluna khabir. Again, what does the ayah conclude with? Allah is all aware. The first one was Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir. Allah is all of what you do, all seeing. Here, Allah is of what you do, all knowing. When you do your hifz, you have to pay attention. I remember memorizing these two ayat. Wallah bima ta'maluna basir is at the bottom of the page on the right. And Wallah bima ta'maluna khabir is at the top of the page of the left. And I'm like, okay, I gotta remember these two, don't mix them up, But again, right, with hifz, you have to pay attention because they're very similar. But the takeaway, the lesson we take is what, be mindful of your actions, be mindful of your behavior, right? Especially when there's dispute and disagreement. And so with that, inshallah, we conclude the ayat for tonight. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this Quran a nur for us, to grant us its recitation day and night in a manner that is pleasing to Him. We ask Allah to make it a guide for us in this dunya and akhirah, to make it a guide to all good and a protection from all evil. We ask Allah to grant us the intercession of the Quran on the Day of Judgment. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of the people of the Quran, those who are the people of Allah and His devoted servants. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, our parents and our teachers and all of the Muslimin. Allahumma ameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.